You guys all good?
Check, check.
Okay.
Check, check.
Well, welcome everybody. My name is Larry Boone. I'm one of the members of the Carrollwood Board of Directors. And this is Rebuilders of the Barn. And to all that come to this happy place, welcome. And this was indeed Walt's happy place. Before Disneyland, Walt spent a lot of wonderful time inside the barn here, playing around with his machinery and his equipment, building miniatures, spending some quiet time, kind of decompressing from the stresses of the studio, and having some friends over every now and again. And you know, back when Walt was about 4 years old, his family moved to Marceline, Missouri. And Walt and his sister Ruth would spend a lot of time playing in the family barn, in and around the barn there on the farm. And it was a really magical place for Walt. And he featured barns in some of his films. And when it came time to pick a centerpiece, a point of operations for the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad, it's not surprising that he chose a barn as that structure. Now, Walt also did a lot of dreaming and imagining, I should say. We didn't have Imagineering yet, but he did a lot of imagining in the barn about a place that he wanted to build that eventually became Disneyland. And he did so much dreaming in there that the former head of the Walt Disney Imagineering, Marty Sklar, gave the barn the nickname, the birthplace of Imagineering. So indeed, it's a very special place, and we're very happy that the Disney family, particularly Diane Miller, was able to save this structure and get it brought out here. So at this time, I would like to introduce our panel to you. Over on your right, this is the fellow that did the redrawings and the plans so we could get the barn built and reconstructed out here and get those plans certified and set up to code by the city. Please welcome architect Miguel Fernandez. Woo! In the center here, we have the guy I like to call the hammer and nails guy. He and his crew are the ones that actually came out and did the physical disassembly of the barn, the eventual reassembly of the barn, as you see it here today. Please welcome contractor Bill Abel. And over on your left-hand side, we have the person along with his wife Sharon, who was the curator of the Carrollwood Pacific Historical Society, now known as the Carrollwood Society, the author of a whole bunch of books, including the Walt Disney Railroad story, and the guy I like to call the foreman or the quarterback of this whole construction or reconstruction project. Please welcome Michael Broggie.
Hey.
Michael! Okay, we're going to start over here with Miguel. Miguel, what did you think when you were first contacted about the barn relocation, and who contacted you?
So Michael called me. I'd been doing a lot of stuff with Carrollwood up to that point, and this was just yet another thing that Michael sprung on me. And I wasn't as familiar with it at that moment as I would become soon. We took a trip, Michael and Sharon and I and a few others, on a very rainy day. Michael's son, Stephen, videotaped it. You can find that visit on YouTube, actually. But at that point, the magnitude didn't quite hit me. Only as I got into it, and then, going on after that, certainly was how important this is to the whole story, the whole milieu of everything Disney.
Mm-hmm. Any building code differences or construction differences between 1949 when the barn was first built and when you got involved in the project in 1998 or 99?
Yeah, the building code changes constantly, and it was much more, I wouldn't say lax, but it wasn't as intricate as it becomes over the years. They changed the code, they update it every 3 years. So, and you have to get a new code, and it gets adopted by the state and the city that you're working in. That being said, the barn, the original plans, what John Cowles, the original architect, did to design the structure of the barn was pretty well state of the art up even when we did the relocation. It was a lot of stuff that he put in there. It was a very serious building. And interestingly, when we took it apart, Bill can attest to this, there was a lot of stuff that wasn't necessarily in the building that was in the plans. So they left a few things out. But it was really good. And the thing was that the city deemed it not a brand new build, but a relocation of existing building. So we were able to take John Cal's original drawings and append them to some new drawings that I put together for things like a foundation, because you're not gonna take the slab from Carrollwood Drive to Griffith Park. So you have to build a whole brand new slab and stem walls. But they accepted all of that. They packaged it together. Bill gave me this today, as a matter of fact. This is the job site set. This has John Cal's drawings and my drawings in there. And it was good to go right at the beginning.
Miguel, did you have any problems or particular issues with getting this thing, up to code, or anything with the city or the county or anything that was a glitch that is particularly problematic?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any glitches politically or problematically. The one thing that we did was in discovering, as we took it apart, the condition of some of the members in this barn for sitting there for 50 years. There was a lot of wood rot. There was a lot of termite infestation. So essentially we rebuilt a structural frame from scratch and reused as much as we could of the framework of the barn. And then everything that you see on the exterior and interior, that's all original stuff for the most part. And we made it better than it was before, because the studio craftsmen that built the barn, I think they just went quite quickly on it. It's amazing that it lasted half a century, but we've added some things that nobody sees because they're embedded in the walls, but we've added some structural supports for anti-seismic and some sheer plywood all over and on the roof as well. So I think it'll be here in another 25 years and hopefully 50 years, and we'll see you all then.
Hey, did anybody help you in particular with your phase of things, or anybody that helped streamline the project?
So I have a good friend who was a civil engineer, and he helped me select some of the structural members that we added that are encased in the walls. You don't see them, but they're there. And so I was able to get assistance with him. And then there were a whole lot of people at the city that were vested on wanting to make this happen. So high-powered people. And they all had a role to play. And then, of course, there were people at LALS, like Pam and Wilbur Dong and Tim or Jake Harsman, that helped make it happen as far as location. And the city, some high-powered people like Tom LaBonge and Steve Soberoff, who went on to even bigger things. Tom LaBonge was a city council member here in this district for many years afterwards, and years later. They all just pretty much made sure that the project wasn't going to get bogged down in any bureaucratic or typical delays. When you submit something, it takes a while to get it looked at by the plan checkers. This pretty much, as far as I could tell, sailed on through, and it was approved, and then Bill took over from there.
Even though it was a barn.
Well, that's interesting, because on John Cal's original drawings, he labels it as an accessory structure. That's what he calls it, accessory structure to the family home. And I believe that it probably didn't even go through plan check back in 1949. I think that they just built it. He drew the plans. He drew a good set of plans. The carpenters then went ahead and built it. And I can't tell that it was actually submitted for a permit. But, they built it. They built it good. And we built it better, a little bit better.
Well, that's great. Thanks, Miguel. We'll get back to you here in a few minutes. Over to you, Bill. What was your reaction when you were first contacted about rebuilding a barn?
Well, I was told that it was a Walt Disney barn, and I was very, very humbled at the thought and intimidated, thinking that Walt Disney built Disneyland what would they need me for? And this seemed, it just seemed to me that I was enormously fortunate to get to be involved in this. And with Miguel's plan, it was actually relatively straightforward, relatively easy. I think the things that gave me pause the first night or two thinking about this, putting this together, was where was it going to be? Now, I'm accustomed to building homes, and so we have side yard setbacks and front and rear setbacks, but this was just sort of placed out here. And the other thing is that in the original location, that way was uphill, but in this location, this way is uphill. And if you notice, the floor is depressed so that the barn has this nice low look. And so I was worried that in a big storm, we were going to have a swimming pool. So, but as Miguel had already figured out, his plan laid out that the direction of flow was that way, and we were able to set the elevations to protect the building.
Yeah, we haven't had a whole lot of flooding inside the structure over the years, which is, something went right. Something went right, yeah.
Thank goodness. But,
Yeah.
my 10-year commitment is up, that.
So, being a Disney family-related project, did this impact your decision at all to get on board, or?
Absolutely. The Disney name is so iconic. I mean, I grew up with Annette Funicello, and that whole Disney thing was just part of my youth. And I had the enormous privilege of being invited to Disneyland on opening day. And the night before, I got to meet Walt. And so it was just another little teeny step that I was blessed, again, to get to meet Walt and then to be involved in moving the barn here to Griffith Park.
Yeah. How long did it actually take for the disassembly, and then I know it had to go into storage after that for a while, and then how long did it take for the reassembly?
The stock answer, of course, is it took too long. But I think my recollection was it was about 3 months. It took us about a week or a week and a half to take it apart. And then we put it into trucks and containers and parked it out here while we did the foundations. But as we took it apart, we were trying to be very, very careful with making sure all our dimensions agreed, but not only with Miguel's plan, but with the actual building. So once the foundations were in, it was just an assembly of a jigsaw puzzle. So I had all the pieces numbered in those pictures.
Yeah, were there any particular problems or difficulties, and how many were on your team?
We did some, we made the building significantly stronger underneath the skin than the original. As Miguel mentioned, we have hold-down restraints and overturn restraints and extra bolting and that sort of thing. And we put the studs in at 16 inches on center, which is today's codes, instead of 24 inches on center, the way it was originally built. But you can't see any of that from the outside skin, so we just wanted it to last. Now, that building is virtually the same age as me, and so I wish I looked that good.
You didn't just have a paint job last year.
Yeah, I'll try that. Earl Scheib, here I come.
Yeah, for the folks that don't know, the whole barn had a whole facelift, so to speak, new paint, all kinds of things went on inside and out, completely new roof and everything. Pretty much headed up by Joanna Miller, and yes, it does look beautiful. And yeah, here's to another 75 years, I hope. And Bill, we'll get back to you a little later with some more.
Thank you.
Michael, what were your initial thoughts when Diane contacted you about this project?
You have the right number? Actually, that call came to Sharon and me, and she was well aware of the Carrollwood heritage and my family's involvement with Disney through my father and 8 members of our family. And the weekends that my father and my older brother Roger and myself crewed with for Walt out at Carrollwood. You own a railroad, you got to have a crew. So we were the crew on the weekends. And when she called, it was like reconnecting. I was very concerned because I was aware that the family was going through a difficult time. Lillian had passed away in December of '97, and the family was compelled to sell Carrollwood. And that had to be a difficult decision because that was the center point of the family, was Carrollwood. And for those of you that aren't aware, the name comes from the street. It's Carrollwood Drive. 355 North Carrollwood Drive, Holmby Hills. So when she called and said, "We've got to save Dad's barn," and I didn't initially realize what that entailed, but I was aware of the barn, having been inside and out front and all around that barn growing up as a kid. I was well aware of it. So we agreed in that call, Diane, whatever it takes, we will save the barn, because the property was already in escrow to be sold. And Diane was convinced that that barn would probably be reduced to kindling, because the person that bought it had other ideas for how that property would be redeveloped. And if any of you have followed the evolution of that site, it's now a huge mansion. They expanded it 5 acres beyond the original 5 acres, so it's not a 10-acre property. The last time it sold for north of $85 million. The original price was $8.5 million when the family estate sold the property. So the evolution of the property is to save this barn, and we were very fortunate to have the talents of Miguel, Fernandez, Bill Abel that could step up and take on this assignment for a project that certainly is well below the level of what Bill Abel is capable of doing. He is a specialist in restoration construction. And if you're familiar at all with construction work, restoration is as good as it gets. And then Miguel, his talent to take John Cowles Jr.'s original drawings and convert them into provable plans in the city of Los Angeles. And we had to learn this whole mechanism of approval and working within the government of the city of Los Angeles. And it was originally the intent of the city. They offered to Diane to locate the museum here in Griffith Park. And they had other ideas. They wanted to be in north, near where they lived, up in San Francisco, which of course is where the museum is located. And this became kind of an adjunct. And one of the things that I'm always pleased to say, of all the Disney attractions around the world, this is the only free Disney attraction on the planet, is this barn. Even the parking is free. And in the city of LA, that's something. So this is legacy. And I was here 5 years ago when we celebrated the 20th anniversary. I'm so pleased to be invited and be part of this, the 25th, the silver anniversary of the barn. And I can remember standing outside that barn, probably 8 years old, and there was no gate on the property at the time. Literally anybody could walk into the property. And I'm standing there, and my brother and I had hooked up the consist. For those who aren't into railroading, that's all the cars ready to haul passengers. And we had hauled anthracite nut coal that Walt had hauled in from Pennsylvania to power his steam engine. Everything was to perfect scale. Even the nuggets were 1/8 scale for his miniature locomotive. And I'm standing there next to Walt, and he looks at this line. There was probably 150 people lined up. And Walt looks at that line of people. He says, I don't know how in the hell they found out I got a railroad, and I don't know a single one of these people. But you know, everyone got a ride. Every person got a ride on Walt's railroad around that yard. And the barn being the centerpiece, it wasn't the showplace that it is now, thanks to our foundation and society. But in those days, it was a workshop. There was woodworking equipment, there was metalworking equipment, and Walt loved to work with his hands. The Germans have a term for it, Fingerspritten, skill with the hands. And Walt would come home, as Larry was referring earlier, he would come home from a busy day at the studio with all the pressures of running the Disney organization, and his happy place awaited him. He would park the car, take off his jacket, walk down to the barn, and for the next few hours, Walt would decompress, building different projects, miniatures. He loved miniatures inside that barn, until Lillian or Thelma the cook would call on that hand-cranked phone that's still in the barn. Walt, dinner's ready. Come on up to the house and have dinner. So we have in this barn the essence of the real Walt. And sure, the corporation has a varnished version of Walt, but if you really want to touch the essence of who Walt was, this barn, where he spent his time, his happy time, right inside that building. And just as an aside, I want to share with all of you that my partner is not here. But she's here in Europe. Sharon has a terrible affliction called Alzheimer's. She's in a care facility in Arizona, about 15 minutes from where we were living in Prescott, Arizona. And she dearly would love to be here, sharing with you how special all of this is. Her name is at the foot of that flag, alongside mine. So we'll always be together. Thank you. Michael, were there any other key people that we didn't mention here besides Bill and Miguel and yourself? Yeah, well, Tom LeBlanc was mentioned. This would not have happened without Tom ramrodding this through the government. He wasn't a city councilman yet. He was the special assistant to the mayor, Reardon. And Tom took a special interest. I remember going out to Carrollwood with Tom and visiting the property, walking the property, and he just adopted this. And he would come out here often I'm sure that our older members would remember seeing Tom come out here and just spend time. He just loved this place. He loved Griffith Park. And so we were the beneficiary of a fellow that really understood what all of this meant. And the partnership with the LA Live Steamers. Walt was a charter member of the LA Live Steamers Club. And when they started shutting down the Carrollwood operation, he had donated the trackage from his home to this club. Trestles that you see around the area were deconstructed from the property and moved here. And there's the Disney Loop. If you ride on the miniature railroads here, you'll go through the Disney Loop. So forever Walt will be part of this 10-acre site. And when the idea of the barn to move it here, because this is all city property, it's all under the jurisdiction of the city government. And frankly, there were some folks in the LA Live Steamers that weren't thrilled with the idea of a barn coming into their area. I mean, to be frank about it, it was a bit of a job to convince them it wasn't going to be a terrible thing to have a Disney barn on their property. But I think over the years, the majority of the members have embraced the barn as part of their operation. And there were a couple of incidences where the LA Live Steamers were challenged by the state of California that they were determining that they were operating an amusement park. And we assisted them in arguing, no, they're not an amusement park, which would have put them under a whole jurisdiction. They are a museum, like the barn. It's a museum. And that saved the LA Live Steamers from coming under that jurisdiction of the state of California. So in a way, we've helped each other in various ways. Plus the family. The barn structure itself, but you see these concrete paths that wind through here, all of that was provided by the Disney family. They donated the funds. The lighting systems that you see through here were donated. And then Ollie Johnston's family donated his quarter-scale depot. And then the combine car, which was Walt's favorite car on the Retlaw 1 consist that ran at Disneyland. And that's the last, other than the Lily Bell coach, that's the last remaining coach, and in beautiful shape. It's been restored. And that is a real treasure, because Walt just loved that combine car. And there's a lot of story about how Walt used to use his combine car when he was a kid selling goods on the Missouri Pacific Railroad as a news bush. And he kept his goods in the combine car. And that's why he told his crew, my father included, I want a combine car. And they said, well, Walt, you're going to limit seating. You're taking up half of the car with storage for luggage. There's no luggage. And Walt said, I don't care, I want a combine car. And when Walt says, I want, you have one answer. Yes, Walt, we will do that. We will build you a combine car. And they did. So there are a lot of backstories. I mean, you could fill a book with these stories. I think somebody did that, didn't they? Yeah, oh, there it is. It's a book, copy right there. Oh, thank you. Thank you for your support. And there are 25,000 of those in print. It's unbelievable. But the whole process of preserving this building on behalf of the family, and to have Joanna here, a member of the family, and to recognize its place in Disney history that we all share. We all share this. That's why the family provided it. So you all could come here and visit with your family, with your relatives, with your grandkids, great-grandkids, give them some insight into what the real Walt Disney is all about.
Bill, you have any other thing you want to add?
Michael, thank you. We truly thank you. You ran this whole thing, you ramrodded it, you got it to happen. Bless your heart. Thank you very much.
And Miguel?
Yeah, same goes for me. Michael pretty much created all of this from scratch, was in the right place at the right time to assist the Disney family in making the barn happen, but there was a lot of stuff that Carolwood has done for the legacy of Walt outside of the barn itself. And I want to also thank the barn crew, yourself, Larry, everybody else who's been involved in the last 25 years, for keeping this place pristine, for keeping it going, and for keeping it open for the public every month. And all the other stuff that you've done after the barn came here to make it an even more special place with the Combine, with Holly Johnson's Depot. And I know that there are efforts ongoing to someday, hopefully, display the latest acquisition that the Carolwood Foundation has, which is the last remaining engine and ore cars, passenger cars, from the mine train through nature's wilderness. That's in the possession of Carolwood. And someday, hopefully, I'll be able to get to do another set of plans for a little structure that would protect that. And I'm looking forward to that.
Woo! Hello. There we are. Anyway, that pretty much is our time limit for this particular panel. We'd like to thank Miguel, Bill, and Michael, and a big round of applause for them, please. So thank you, panelists, for being here and sharing with us today. And Michael, please, our best to Sharon, our fondest wishes and everything for her and for you. Thanks everybody for being here, and we're getting ready to do our dinner rotation. Please remain seated until we release your table for dinner. And thanks everybody.